One problematic part of the lore has been sorting out who was the first Elden Lord. According to Godfrey, he was the first.
Upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord.
According to the remembrance of the Dragonlord that we receive when we defeat Dragonlord Placidusax, he was Elden Lord in the prehistoric age before the Erd Tree. Placidusax came from a time long before the Greater Will laid claim to the lands between by sending the Elden Ring. So, if he predates the Elden Ring, how could he be an Elden Lord? To find a possible answer to that, let's analyze a particularly interesting mural found in the arena in the ancient royal city of Farum Azula where we fight Malekith. Here we find a stone statue of a woman surrounded by 3 wolves that we could spend all day theorizing on alone, but what I'd like to draw your attention to particularly is the depiction right above this statue. We find a depiction of what appears to be a very different and far larger Elden Ring, interwoven with roots that I personally believe is intimately connected or very well could be a direct depiction of the primordial crucible of life. One thing that I have theorized about in regards to the nature of the Elden Ring is that it acts like a sort of anchor of power for a particular outer god. I believe that the Elden Ring is essentially the direct connection that the Greater Will has to the lands between. If you take the depiction seen in Malekith's arena and superimpose the Elden Ring above it, we find that the lower arc lines up nearly perfectly with the upper arc of this one, forming what seems to be part of a larger whole. And some further speculation on my part is that if each outer god has their own Elden Ring, and if you were to lay them all out, you could probably match them all up into one greater ring. The implication there being that maybe there was a time before that the outer gods cooperated with one another rather than warring against one another, attempting to lay claim to the lands between. Similar to how the demigods, all with their own great runes of the current Elden Ring, war against each other, vying over power over the complete Elden Ring. As I said, I theorize that the Elden Ring is a kind of anchor of power for the Greater Will to lay claim to the lands between. As long as the ring exists in one form or another, the Greater Will still has influence and lays claim to the land. The shattering of the Elden Ring, if we take this assumption, would have been a direct, literal assault on the territorial claim that the Greater Will would have had on the land. To me, that's why when we reach the end of the game, we find Marika broken and shackled to the lower arc of the physical Elden Ring itself. This part. You even see a red spike impaling her, possibly the shackle itself restraining her in place, holding the brittle final pieces of the ring together.
Great Elden Ring, root of the Golden Order, anchor of all lands, giver of grace, wellspring of all joy. Until it was shattered, the tragic corruption of the Order has taken its toll. But the Greater Will has not abandoned the realm, nor the life that inhabits it.
The Greater Will, speaking through the 2 fingers, makes it abundantly clear to the Tarnished Champion that its desire is for us to mend the broken ring in order for the Greater Will to restore its full power and influence on the lands between.
Listen, the fingers speak. Brave Tarnished, your great rune is a handsome shard of the Elden Ring. Seek another of its kind to become Elden Lord and restore the Golden Order.
If you pay attention to what's going on in the game, it seems apparent to me that this is a time of great conflict between the outer gods. With the Greater Will's influence on the lands between waning after the shattering of the Elden Ring, many of the outer gods are attempting to bring their own influence into the land as well. We have the Formless Mother attempting to set up Mohg's dynasty. We have the Serpent King through Praetor Rykard. the outer god of the moon working through Rani, the outer god of chaos or frenzied flame working through several characters, including potentially the Tarnished Champion depending on the ending that you choose, and many other examples of outer gods trying to fill the power vacuum that is forming as the Elden Ring, the anchor of power of the greater will, is waning. So to answer our original question, who was the first Elden Lord? Was it Dragonlord Placidusax or was it Godfrey? Well, the answer is both. My theory is that they were both Elden Lords, but under a different Elden Ring. Godfrey was the Elden Lord to the Elden Ring sent by the Greater Will, while Placidusax would have been the Elden Lord to his Elden Ring. But to be the Elden Lord, it seems clear that you have to be married to a god. We know Godfrey, previously known as the warrior Horolu, was king consort to Queen Marika, but who would Dragonlord Placidusax have been married to? Let's read the description again of the remembrance of the Dragonlord. The Dragonlord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. I originally interpreted that last part as his outer god fled, but it only says God, small g. I believe that the god who fled was the one he was consort to. As an Elden Lord with no consort, you cannot be an Elden Lord anymore. And so, with the Greater Will sending its Elden Ring, which looks like it could have superseded the previous one, the outer god that ruled over the previous age lost its claim over the lands between. But have you noticed something strange about the Erd Tree? Have you noticed that as brightly as it shines, there's a very definable section of it that does not glow at all? A giant scar running up the side of the Erd Tree, very visible from the throne. In fact, according to the description of the Erd Tree seal, it used to glow even brighter before the Elden Ring was shattered. Yet, there's this enormous scar that we see that even extends to the roots, found in the deep root depths, where the Erd Tree shines no light whatsoever. And why is that? If we take another look at what we think could be a previous Elden Ring found in Farum Azula, we see that the ring's runes are interwoven with roots. As we see in the depiction of the Elden Ring over the previous one, I think it's possible that the previous Elden Ring, the primordial crucible of life, still exists. And we've even been very close to it in the game. But that'll be a topic for another video. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and turn notifications on to be notified when I release more lore videos. For the time being, I'm going to be focused mainly on Elden Ring lore, but I do plan on covering lore topics from lots of different games and films in the future. If you have any suggestions for future topics, I'd love to hear them in the comments. If you have any corrections, I'd love to hear them as well, and I'd like to address them in a future video. Be sure to also check out my main channel, Night Docs, for premium quality documentaries about fascinating mysteries. Until next time, Tarnished.